Welcome to Oregon DEQ's training on asbestos survey report requirements. We hope you find this training helpful and encourage you to explore the resources provided in the slides and on the asbestos survey resource section of the DEQ asbestos webpage. If you have additional questions, please reach out to DEQ's asbestos staff and we'll be happy to assist you. It should be noted that Lane Regional Air Protection Agency is the regulatory authority for asbestos in Lane County. While their asbestos rules are similar to DEQ's, there are differences between the two programs. All work being done in Lane County must be completed according to LRAPA rules and in coordination with their asbestos staff. This training is meant to be a resource for accredited inspectors and asbestos abatement contractors so they can better understand the asbestos survey and survey report requirements in Oregon. With that in mind, this information will help anyone gain a better understanding of Oregon's asbestos survey rules. It's important to be familiar with the location of DEQ's asbestos rules. It's also recommended to use the online version and not a printed copy. By using the online version, you can avoid missing any changes to the rules that may impact how you do business. You can find the asbestos rules by going directly to the Secretary of State website or through a link on the DEQ asbestos website. There's also a survey fact sheet linked on the DEQ asbestos website that contains the survey report requirements. The quickest way to find DEQ's asbestos website is to search for Oregon DEQ Asbestos and select the search result titled Asbestos Information, Hazards and Cleanup, as shown at the top of this slide. This will take you to the asbestos homepage where you can navigate between multiple sections to find the information you need. DEQ has added a new section to the website titled Asbestos Survey Resources. The survey resources are for everyone, including trainers, accredited inspectors, and contractors. As our survey outreach continues, more information will be added to this section. DEQ's asbestos rules were updated in 2018, including updates to the sections for asbestos surveys. The survey rules contain very specific information that must be included in the survey report. By requiring a full report completed by an accredited asbestos inspector, information is available regarding when the survey was performed, why it was performed, the areas of the facility and materials surveyed, the location and condition of asbestos-containing material, the approximate quantity of asbestos-containing material in square feet or linear feet, any limitations of the survey, and recommended response actions. A survey report is made up of several components, one of which is the laboratory report. However, a lab report alone does not meet the survey report requirements. An accredited inspector must complete the survey and survey report. While survey reports do not expire, it is important to review older reports before relying on their accuracy to ensure that the survey included samples collected from the area to be impacted and that all suspect materials were sampled. In Oregon, the first rule requiring an asbestos survey was implemented in 2001, with an update in 2016 requiring surveys for residential demolitions, then the addition of survey requirements for residential renovations in 2018. Oregon's asbestos rules contain definitions that aid in understanding and interpreting the rules. The following slides will discuss some of the definitions that play a role in determining survey requirements, but we encourage you to be familiar with all of the definitions in Oregon Administrative Rule 340-248-0010. According to OAR 340-248-0270, Section 1, a survey is required prior to a renovation or demolition activity. It's important to understand what DEQ means by demolition, renovation, and facility. Demolition includes the complete demolition of a facility or when an area with a load-supporting structural member is removed. In addition, if a fire department performs a training fire on any type of facility, it is considered demolition. Renovation is the altering of one or more facility components. Basically, just about any activity could be considered a renovation. However, logic and common sense do need to be applied. As an example, if a wood deck with no other types of materials will be removed, that would not require an asbestos survey, as wood does not contain asbestos. Any material that contains more than 1% asbestos by weight is regulated in Oregon as asbestos-containing material and must be abated according to OAR 340-248. Facility means structures and includes equipment, vehicles, vessels, and ships. There is a separate definition of installation, which means a building or structure or a group of buildings or structures at a single site under the control of the same owner or operator. As an example, a group of 50 duplexes with the same ownership on the same property are considered an installation and are considered commercial, not residential. RVs, trailers, and campers are considered a facility and require an asbestos survey by an accredited inspector prior to demolition or disposal. If asbestos-containing materials are identified during the survey, all friable asbestos-containing materials must be properly abated by a DEQ-licensed asbestos abatement contractor. All non-friable asbestos-containing materials can be removed by a contractor or individual who is not a licensed asbestos abatement contractor, as long as the material maintains its non-friable condition. Notification, packaging, and disposal requirements still apply to non-friable materials. If any of the residential exceptions are met, then the residential building is no longer considered a residence and must be considered a commercial facility. Residential exceptions include use by a fire department for a training exercise, such as a training fire or other type of training, residences that are demolished for larger projects, such as highway construction, or if the property will be developed into commercial or industrial use, or if multi-unit residential buildings with more than 4 units will be constructed. The residence being demolished is no longer considered residential. If one or more facilities at the same site by the same owner or operator are to be renovated or demolished, if there is a residence involved, it would be considered a commercial facility. As an example, if a church and the rectory on the same site are under the same operator, this could be the contractor, are to be demolished, then the rectory or the residence portion would be considered a commercial facility. Lastly, if there is a residence in a commercial facility, the residence is considered commercial. As an example, a multi-story building has commercial businesses on the first floor and residential units on the second and third floors. These residential units are considered a commercial facility. Whether a material is friable or non-friable must be identified as part of the survey. Friable materials, when dry, can be crumbled, pulverized, or reduced to powder by hand pressure or by the forces expected during the course of demolition, renovation, transportation, or disposal. Any references in the survey report to the definition of friable must be cited from the DEQ rules and not NESHAP, OSHA, or other regulations. Typical friable asbestos materials include, but are not limited to, sheet vinyl flooring, popcorn and any other type of wall or ceiling texture, joint compound and skim coats, Nicolite roof paper, silver paint on a roof or other surface, and thermal system insulation, including pipe insulation, heat duct tape and insulation, heat unit and water heater insulation, and tank and boiler insulation. These materials are always friable and cannot be listed in the survey report as non-friable. Friable materials must be removed by an asbestos abatement contractor or the owner-occupant of a privately owned single residence. The definition of non-friable asbestos material means asbestos-containing material that is not friable. When dry, non-friable asbestos material cannot be crumbled, pulverized, or reduced to powder by hand pressure or by the forces expected to act on the material in the course of demolition, renovation, transportation, or disposal. Non-friable abatement can be conducted by any person, as long as the material remains non-friable and the notification, packaging, and disposal rules are followed. Typical non-friable asbestos materials include, but are not limited to, vinyl floor tile, glues and mastics, cement board siding, roofing or panels, window glazing, cement, water, or sewer pipe, and petroleum-based roofing. Non-friable materials in poor condition prior to any activity or that have been exposed to fire or excessive heat must be considered friable. Non-friable materials can be rendered friable during handling, removal, packaging, transportation, and disposal activities. Non-friable materials must be maintained in non-friable condition during all phases of abatement to be considered non-friable. If the material is rendered friable, work must stop, and an asbestos abatement contractor must complete the abatement according to the friable rules. In poor condition is defined and means the binding of the material is losing its integrity as indicated by peeling, cracking, or crumbling of the material. Remember this definition when completing the ACM table in the survey report. Any reference in the survey report to the definition of non-friable or in poor condition must be cited from the DEQ rules and not NESHAP, OSHA, or other sources. The exemptions to survey requirements are listed in OAR 340, 248, 0250. Owner-occupants renovating the single private home they live in are exempt from several asbestos rules, including the requirement to have a survey completed. If the home will be demolished, a survey by an accredited inspector is required. During this presentation, discussions about survey requirements are from the perspective that the owner-occupied exemption does not apply, and abatement is being conducted by a contractor. All commercial buildings require an asbestos survey. The term commercial can include, but is not limited to, schools, hospitals, apartments, commercial buildings, industrial facilities, and any residential facility with more than 4 units. Demolition or renovation activity at residential buildings with 4 or fewer units constructed after January 1, 2004 do not require an asbestos survey. If the building owner or operator chooses not to have an asbestos survey performed by an accredited inspector and assumes materials contain asbestos, then all materials impacted during the project must be treated as friable asbestos-containing material, whether it likely contains asbestos or not. Mastic and roofing products that are fully encapsulated with a petroleum-based binder that are not hard, dry, or brittle and maintain their non-friable condition during abatement do not require a survey. Materials that are sealed in a rigid casing do not require a survey as long as the casing remains intact during removal, handling, and disposal activities. Finally, projects that occur due to a needed repair operation where asbestos removal is not the primary objective and the project involves less than 3 square or linear feet does not require an asbestos survey. It should be noted that asbestos abatement projects may not be subdivided into smaller sized units in order to qualify for this exemption. DEQ defines an accredited inspector as a person who has completed training, received accreditation, and maintains valid accreditation under 40 CFR Part 763, Subpart E, Appendix C, which is the Model Accreditation Plan, Section B, which outlines initial training, and Subsection 3 for inspectors. Surveys must be completed by an accredited inspector. While samples collected by a homeowner or individual who is not an accredited inspector are not considered sufficient under DEQ's current survey rules, there is also no expiration date for surveys. This means that samples collected prior to the 2018 rule change would be allowable. It is still highly recommended to have a new survey completed to ensure no suspect materials were missed during sampling and that samples were collected appropriately and from the areas being renovated or demolished. In addition, These sample results cannot be incorporated into a survey and survey report if an accredited inspector ultimately conducts a survey. The laboratory that analyzes samples must be accredited by a nationally recognized program or participate in a nationally recognized bulk sample asbestos proficiency testing program. A list of accepted labs is included on DEQ's asbestos website under Asbestos Survey Resources. DEQ requires that at least 3 random bulk samples are collected per homogeneous area for sprayed or troweled-on materials. As an example, if there is popcorn ceiling texture throughout a residence that is uniform in texture and was applied at the same time, a minimum of 3 samples would have to be collected to determine if asbestos is present. Each sample must be packaged and analyzed separately. Additional samples can always be collected, but not fewer. This applies even if only a small area containing sprayed or troweled-on materials is to be removed. As an example, a water leak occurs and damages part of a wall in the bathroom. 3 random samples from that wall are still required. A survey must be completed prior to renovation or demolition projects at commercial buildings, regardless of the age of the building. DEQ must be at least as stringent as federal rules, which do not list a construction date when the survey requirements no longer apply. Asbestos surveys are required for residential buildings constructed before January 1st, 2004. Federal rules do not apply to residential buildings with 4 units or less. The Oregon legislature directed DEQ to include the 2004 construction date for residential survey requirements. A copy of the complete survey report, either as a hard copy or electronic version, must be available on site during renovation or demolition activities, including during the asbestos abatement project. DEQ may request a copy of the survey report during a site inspection or as a part of regular records review. The only surveys that must follow Asbestos Hazards and Emergency Response Act requirements are public or nonprofit elementary and secondary schools. More information on AHERA requirements can be found on EPA's website. Inspectors must be AHERA accredited, however DEQ does not require AHERA surveys unless the facility being inspected is a school and used for that purpose. All of the survey report components listed in OAR 340, 248, 0270, 3D must be included in the report. Failure to include all of the required information in the survey report can be considered a violation. Survey reports have specific components which must be included. Those are described in OAR 340, 248, 0270, 3D. This includes the date or dates the survey was performed, the phone number and copy of the certificate of accreditation for each inspector involved in the survey, and the site address and location where the survey was performed. Survey reports must list the name and phone number of the owner or operator of the facility where the survey was performed, and of the owner or operator of the demolition or renovation activity if it is different. A description of the facility and area surveyed, including the past and current use, the square footage of the area surveyed, the number of floors, and the approximate construction date. The purpose of the survey, for example, demolition, renovation, damage due to fire, water, or other purpose, must be listed. A detailed description of any limitations of the survey must be included in the report. This is usually associated with areas that are not accessible, but may also include areas that were not included in the scope of the project. An example of the limitations may include: this report applies only to the specific subject property, location, and area detailed in this report. While areas specified by the customer were surveyed and materials sampled, areas behind walls and/or covered by structural members or materials requiring destructive means to access, which could not be found with reasonable diligence, were not sampled during the survey. There can be hidden crawl spaces and cavities that were not surveyed. Any areas not specified to be surveyed cannot be assumed to be free of asbestos, as no survey was performed to determine the presence of asbestos-containing materials in these areas. A table listing materials found to contain asbestos must be included in the report. This table must contain specific information for each of the asbestos-containing materials, including the percent asbestos and the type of asbestiform, the color, texture, and pattern of the material, the specific location in the facility where the material was collected, the condition of the material, both in terms of in good condition or in poor condition, friable or non-friable, and the approximate quantity of the material present in the facility. This information provides property owners, contractors, and DEQ with the potential scope of abatement, areas that contain asbestos, the abatement requirements related to if the material is friable or non-friable, and the estimated quantity of asbestos-containing materials. Finally, a survey report must include a recommendation of response action and a complete copy of the laboratory report. The recommended response actions need to direct the recipient to OAR 340-248 for the proper abatement, including handling, removal, packaging, transport, and disposal of friable ACM by a DEQ licensed asbestos abatement contractor, or the proper abatement of non-friable ACM according to Oregon's asbestos rules. The recommended response action may note the health risks of asbestos. The lab report must include, at a minimum, the name, address, and phone number of the lab, each unique sample analysis identification number assigned by the inspector at time of sample collection, sample analysis showing presence or absence of asbestos and content of asbestos when present, the name of the analyst, and a completed chain of custody for the samples. It's very important that the location and area surveyed are clearly identified in the survey report. There can be multiple buildings at the site address. Location refers to the building or buildings where the survey was performed. List all the locations at the address where the asbestos survey was performed. As an example, the residence only was surveyed. The residence and attached garage were surveyed. Apartments 100 through 105 were surveyed, or all structures on the property were surveyed, and so on. Make sure and include building names and numbers as appropriate. The area surveyed for the purpose of the survey report means the specific rooms or areas that were surveyed. As an example, the interior and exterior of the residence was surveyed. Throughout the interior was surveyed. Only the kitchen and bathrooms were surveyed. Only the basement was surveyed, and so on. List each of the specific areas surveyed. By providing complete information about the location and areas surveyed, this will allow anyone reading the survey report now or in the future a better understanding of what was or was not included in the survey, especially when the survey is limited in scope and only specific areas are surveyed. The table required in the survey report is only for asbestos-containing materials and materials presumed to contain asbestos, and is not to include negative materials. A separate table can be included in the report for negative materials. The chain of custody form cannot be used in place of a survey report. The chain of custody is one of the required attachments to the survey report. The chain of custody documents the samples collected and everyone who handles the samples from the time of collection to receipt by the lab. The chain of custody is critical evidence documentation and is required to assure in a court of law that the evidence is authentic. DEQ has created 2 generic asbestos survey report templates that can be used by inspectors to create a survey report. At a minimum, these report templates contain all the required information listed in DEQ's asbestos rules. Additional information can be added at the discretion of the inspector. The templates are available on DEQ's asbestos website as Word documents. They can be downloaded and filled out electronically or by hand, adding the asbestos table information once the sample results have been received. If handwritten, the survey report must be legible. It is also preferable to write the report in ink that will not fade over time and not in pencil. DEQ has specific enforcement guidance that staff follow when reviewing violations and issuing enforcement actions. The levels of enforcement include a warning letter, which outlines the alleged violations, provides a description of the rule that was violated, and may include corrective action if necessary. An expedited enforcement offer, or EEO, includes the same components as a warning letter, but also includes a penalty. This is a reduced penalty when compared to the full penalty that would normally be assessed through a formal enforcement action. An EEO may be accepted and paid by the recipient, or it may be denied. If denied, a pre-enforcement notice will be issued and the case referred to the DEQ Office of Compliance and Enforcement. A pre-enforcement notice, or PEN, includes the same components as a warning letter or EEO. The penalty amount under a PEN is the full amount. Penalties can be assessed for each violation. A PEN can be appealed and hearings held to determine the validity of the violation and enforcement action. Base penalty calculations for a survey violation consider factors such as risks to public health and mental state of the person responsible for the violation. Submitting inaccurate or incomplete information related to the asbestos survey or DEQ project notification is a violation. Failure to have a complete copy of the asbestos survey report on site during the renovation or demolition project is a violation. Failure to provide a complete copy of the asbestos survey report to DEQ upon request is a violation. Any of these violations can result in a warning letter, EEO, or pre-enforcement notice. The EEO and PEN will include monetary penalties. While there are survey violations that may receive a warning letter the first time they occur, other violations could receive an EEO or PEN. Those violations include not describing the location and area surveyed. For example, not stating the survey was conducted in the second floor bathroom of a residence or the first floor hallway of Building A. Not including a table of asbestos-containing material or material presumed to contain asbestos. Not including recommended response actions. This is the language that directs the owner or operator to follow DEQ asbestos rules. And not including the laboratory report and completed chain of custody are all violations that may receive an EEO or PEN on the first occurrence. If a violation creates a risk to public health or the violation was flagrant, the type of enforcement response may be escalated. The best way to avoid receiving an enforcement action is to be familiar with the asbestos survey and survey report rules found in OAR 340, 248, 0270, 1 through 4, and to reach out to DEQ for technical assistance if you have any questions. Asbestos abatement contractors are required to have a complete copy of the asbestos survey report, so they will be able to complete the notification accurately, provide a copy to DEQ upon request, and because they must maintain a complete copy of the survey report on site during the asbestos abatement project. Abatement contractors should not be completing and submitting asbestos abatement project notifications on your DEQ Online, YDO, until they have a complete copy of the asbestos survey report. Submitting the original notification with inaccurate or incomplete information can be considered submitting false or inaccurate information to DEQ, which is a violation. Choosing a HERA plan in the survey section of the notification is only applicable for schools and is not to be chosen for other types of facilities. If assumed asbestos materials present is chosen in the survey section of the project notification, all materials impacted during the project must be abated as asbestos-containing material. The quantities listed in linear or square feet in the ACM table of the asbestos survey report are approximates. Abatement contractors must measure for exact quantities of asbestos-containing material for notification and abatement purposes. DEQ regional staff can be contacted at the numbers provided on this slide. Regional contacts are also available on the DEQ asbestos website. While staff are assigned to a certain region and counties, we are able to answer questions for rule compliance and are always happy to have conversations before a project or any potential violations occur. Remember that LRAPA regulates asbestos in Lane County and must be contacted for any projects in Lane County. Thank you. Hope you found this information helpful, and if you have any questions, please reach out.